Well, hello, welcome to the channel. My name's Johnny, and you're watching Hillbilly Modeling. And this is going to be part 3 of our Trumpeter Russian SAM-6 anti-aircraft missile vehicle in 1/35th scale. And in this video, we didn't get to our PE parts in the last video, so we'll be doing the PE, and I think we're going to start off with the tow cable, because Trumpeter has provided us with a really nice copper cable in there, so we need to get that cut to length and shaped and the ends put on it. So we'll do that first, then we'll do our PE, and then we'll move on to the missiles. So we have 3 missiles that we need to build up for our vehicle. So let's go ahead and put some bench time in and see how far we get. Okay, so here we are. This is the vehicle as we have left it from our last video, so we'll just set that aside. We won't need that for a little bit here. Now we're going to go back and start looking at these things that we skipped. Primarily, we're going to start off with our tow cable, and then we'll have some PE to work with there. So let's go ahead and knock out that tow cable. So Trumpeter has provided us with this really nice copper cable here, and it's very multi-strand. So I'm just going to try to straighten it out a little bit from where they've had it folded up in the plastic there. Not worried about it being super straight or anything. One of the things that I do see is that the ends are a little bit frayed there, as you can see. So we need to kind of fix that a little bit. And we'll just twist it back together in the same direction that the cable twist has already made. We don't want to unwind it. So, and we'll straighten this out some. So they have this little diagram here. It says actual size. So I think we'll go ahead and give that an attempt here. Go ahead and bend it around. Normally, the instructions will tell you to cut a piece of wire so many millimeters, you know, and you would go from there. But Trumpeter hasn't done that here, so they've just given this little diagram here of what they think it should look like. So we're going to do our best to try to follow that. Now I am going to use a little bit of masking tape here on the end to kind of, if I can get it to stick, that's going to designate for us where Trumpeter feels the end of it should be. And now we're just going to stick it up onto the front of the vehicle there and see what it looks like. And, well, I got to be honest with you, I really don't like how it looks. So I think I'll just go ahead and do it my way. Big surprise, right? So I rewound it, and we have taken and put in the ends for the cable onto those toe points. And now we're going to go in with a black magic marker and mark about halfway down where the cable is going to insert into those ends. Just like so. That'll be my cutoff point. And then we'll flip the other one around, and we're going to go ahead and mark it as well. Now this is where we're going to cut this cable, because you got to have a little bit of this inserted, but we got enough slack here. You don't have to be very specific, you know. Now I will tell you, make sure that you use wire cutters. Do not use your sprue cutters. If you got a nice pair of sprue cutters, cutting wire of any kind is a bad idea. Just reserve those for plastic only. So we'll trim these off, and I could probably use some sharper wire cutters there. So since we've kind of pinched it by cutting it off, we need to reestablish the diameter by giving it a little bit of twist there and get rid of that flatness. That way we'll have a nice round cable end to insert into the ends that we're going to be putting on this. So we've got some drill bits here. Just going to kind of size this up. And it looks like that 1.2 millimeters is the one we're going to end up with. But we'll slide on down and use the next one, which is the smaller one, which will make it easier for us to get the hole correct. Now, Trumpeter already has a hole started in this, so we don't have to worry about centering it. And we're just going to go ahead and drill it out with that smaller bit. And just drill it down until it bottoms out. and it'll bottom out right where the molding has stopped in the hole there. And of course, if you wanted to make it a little bit deeper, you could. Just be careful that you, number one, don't drill into your finger. That would be bad. And as you can see here, I'm just using my fingers to do this. Now we're going to go with the 1.2 millimeter, which is about the actual size of the cable. And we're just going to remove that excess plastic there right inside that end. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the excess cable there that we cut off. Just kind of straighten the end up on it there, and that's going to be our test piece. Because if we're going to crinkle up some copper, then we don't want to do that on the piece that we're going to be using on the vehicle. And that is kind of a tight little area there, and as you can see, I got a little bit of those fine cables or fine wires pushed out. So we're going to bevel this just a little bit, and that'll really help with the feeding of the cable up into the end of that connector. And we're going to recheck it. I always like to recheck as much as I can, and that goes in perfectly. All right, so now we're ready to actually attach these cable ends. Now when it comes to attaching them, we're going to, since it's metal to plastic, we're going to have to use some CA glue. Now this is Starbond Medium, and mine's getting a little bit old. I've noticed that it has, in the past week or so, it's turned a little yellow, so I guess it's time for a new bottle. But it'll get us through this build. So I'm just going to use a cocktail stick, or a toothpick if you will, to actually put some of that Starbond down inside of it there. That way when we push the cable in, we're not only transferring that CA glue down deeper into the cable end, and then kind of pushing it out around the edge. We're not scraping it off of the cable if we had put it on the cable. So we just put it on, say 90 degrees out, and give it a little twist to line it up, and there we go. And we do the same thing with the opposite side. So we've got both of our cable ends on, and now we're just going to do our little test fit here, if I can grab hold of it. So the idea is there's just enough flexibility in this cable that we should be able to get it to hook, and then we can just bend it around, you know, and get it to latch. So if I can get a hold of it, yeah, okay, yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. A little bit fiddly, but, you know, I'm being really careful with it because I don't want to put too many unnecessary bends into that copper wire because I don't want to have to straighten it out. So this is kind of like a test fitting session here to make sure that my theory on how it's going to work is actually going to work. Because once we get this painted up, we don't want to be scratching all of our paint off. Even if you do prime metal, you know, it's just the way of it. Especially if you're using tweezers on something like this, you'll be scraping the paint and stuff off of it. So we just want to be able to do as much as we can with our fingers. So we need a little bit more shaping there, but you kind of get the idea how that's going to work out. So that looks pretty good. And I think the length is just about right. So that looks good. We'll go ahead and move on. So next up is our PE parts, the photo etch. Now I use a piece of glass here to cut my photo etch on, and that just really helps to keep from deforming the parts. They are kind of fragile. We do need to remove rather, that top film. So this has a plastic film on both sides of the fret. And then for cutting our pieces free of the fret, wow, I'm using this curved blade. And that just helps me really get in close. And as you can see, I can slide it along the part right to where the fret stops and the part begins. And we'll give it a little bit of a rock back and forth, and you can usually just feel the snap, and that will break the part free from the fret. Now by leaving that sticky film on the back side, it actually catches the part, and that way when we cut it free from the other side of the fret, we're not flinging, you know, our little brass part off into the either world, wherever it is, into space and out for the carpet monster. And you don't want to do that because they don't give us any extras here. So the ones you see here is the ones that we have to use. So now we can just use our tweezers and pull off the part that we're going to be working with. And then all the others are still secure on the fret. Now I don't suggest dropping that fret on the floor. You may loosen them and lose them. So now as you can see here, these little handles here that they have for us to bend, they do have a bend line already etched into them, and that's nice. So we don't have to worry about that, and we just need to bend it right along that. And these are all simple bends. There's no compound bends here. So if you're afraid of using photo etch, and I know a lot of you guys are new to modeling, but just shaping these is really easy. But unfortunately they are teeny tiny pieces. Now, like before, attaching metal to plastic, we're going to have to use our CA glue for that. So we will go ahead and put that right at the attachment point. And just make sure that you got enough on there. I think I got too much, but it's going to be fine. Now, I am using tweezers that have the little gripping grooves in it there. That way, we're almost assured that we're not going to fling those little parts out. And so, as you can see, we got that one on, and there's 3 more of these that we'll have to put on. So next up in our instructions is going to be our saw. And as you can see there, they want us to bend those little tabs on the end of our saw blade around to hold the handles. So that ought to be interesting. So let's see what we need to do. First of all, there is a little bit of a burr at the attachment points where we cut it free from the actual fret. So I'm just using a 400 grit sanding stick here, and we're going to sand with the direction of the part, not across it. That way we don't accidentally bend this more than I've already bent it. But yeah, you can really destroy your brass pieces if you try to sand across. Next up, we're going to anneal these because brass can be somewhat brittle and very hard to bend at times, and by annealing it using just heat, as you can see here, I'm just using a lighter to do that. It'll change color for us, which is a good indication that you've probably annealed it enough. And by heating this brass, we're taking the temper out of it, and it becomes less brittle and more apt to bend. So once we've done this annealing on these parts, I'm going to use a little bit of this 91% isopropyl alcohol here just to clean it up. I don't want any residue on this that may affect our paint or our glue, because we are going to be using CA glue to glue those handles on. So we want to make sure that that's clean. So to do those little curls on the end of our saw blade, I've chosen this bit here that's about the same size of these little handles. And as you can see, I've left that sprue gate on those little handles because that really helps me from keeping from losing them, number one, and number two, something else to hold on to. So I do have a big pink eraser, and I'm using that as a bending bed. So it's nice and soft, not too soft, but not so firm that I can't press down into it. And what we're going to do is we're going to lay our saw blade right onto it. Well, if it wouldn't stick to my finger, there we go. And we're going to take that drill bit that we had, and we're going to use that kind of to press down. And if you press down, you will see that it will just curl up. So we've already started to make our bend here. And that's kind of important because it's supposed to be, well, it's supposed to be a bend, you know. It's not supposed to be, well, it's supposed to be a circle. I don't know that we'll actually get a circle out of it, but we're going to do our best to. So we're going to just kind of press it down, and then you can roll it just a little bit and really get that bend started. And that's the big thing. Once you get it started in the right direction, you're halfway home. Now we can just take our drill bit, hold it right there. As you know, it's a little tedious to hold, but you can do that. And as you can see, I'm using the back side of the tweezers there to kind of press it around. And then we're just going to try to bend it around into a little loop. And once we get into a loop there, we can add our CA glue. And then with the part still attached to that sprue gate, we'll just insert that. And make sure everything's lined up. Now it has a little alignment peg there that goes into the hull of the side of the vehicle. So we're going to want that to point towards the vehicle. And we're just going to line that up. Now, you don't have a tremendous amount of time with medium CA glue. You got a little bit to work with it, but it's going to grab hold real soon. So you need to work quickly. Now, once our CA glue sets up, we can go ahead and trim off that sprue gate. And the saw blade is actually something we can really hold on to. And by doing it this way, I don't have to worry about trying to clean up that sprue gate on something very, very small and tiny. I can just do it while it's on the saw blade, and we'll just kind of clean up that little bit of sprue gate that's left there. Just use your X-Acto knife to do that. So to attach this, I'm going to go ahead and use the CA glue, and you just need to put it into the actual hole that those little bitty alignment pins are going to go into. And all we got to do is press it into place. So if we're lucky, everything's going to line up. So let's see how lucky we really are. And it looks like we got it pretty much perfect. There we go. Excellent. Look at that. Now don't worry about that little tarnish from the annealing. That'll all come off when it'll get covered up with paint. So next up we have this exhaust screen that we need to bend so that we can install it. So I've already annealed this part, so it's ready for bending. And the next thing to do is select some sort of a surface to bend it on. And I'm going to use a drill bit. And you just kind of match that up to the type of arc on the back of the vehicle. I don't know what size I'm using. I just chose one. And this, that rubber eraser's it's got too much flex in it, so I took that out of the way. And I'm having to use quite a bit of pressure here. That screen was a little bit tougher than I thought it was going to be. But we're just going to bend it around the drill bit there. And we're going to check our fit. And that's going to be very good. That's a nice bend that we got there. And easy to do. And of course we have to attach with CA glue. No problems there. Add our CA glue. And then all we got to do is place our screen right over those little arcs there to either end. And voila, there we go. That's going to look good. All right, back to our instructions. That would be these little clips that we need to put on for the engine deck. So we have two on either side of that engine deck to do. Now, of course, you cut these out the same way, and we've got our pins from our previous assembly. So all we got to do is get that CA glue on there and just slide these in. It sort of looks like a little keeper of some kind. But they go straight on. No problem, no fuss. Just make sure that you get them lined up. So that's this side. And we're going to do the exact same thing for the opposite side. So these are really easy to put on. Now we have these brackets that go onto the back of the vehicle. And these are for the markers, the night operations, blackout drive markers. And they are etched right where we need to bend them. So we just need to bend those two little corners around. And it has a tab on it there. So we're just going to dip that into that CA glue and stick that tab right into the slot. Now make sure that you've got it oriented correctly. And that's the correct orientation, in case you're wondering. And then we have the one for the opposite side. Same process. And I just want to make sure that it's seated. Don't put a lot of pressure on it, just a little bit to make sure that it's fully seated. And a little bit of CA glue. That will accept our blackout marker. And as you can see, this is a very, very tiny little part. So we got to be careful when we go to put that in. So we have that one, and then we have the one on the opposite side to do. And trying my best to make sure that it is pointing, directly towards the rear of the vehicle. So that is it. We have those two done. And let's go ahead and see what's next. All right. We are at step 12. So with our hull completed, we can start building our missiles. So these are our SAM-6 missiles. So we'll start with the actual missile body itself. That's the largest piece to put together. And we're going to need some clamps. And for that, we're going to be using wooden clothespins. They're perfect for this operation. And as you can see, there's a couple of alignment dowels. And then the way they've molded this, we've got those nice little ribs that run on the top and bottom, I guess, or sides of the missile itself. And we'll just start our glue up, running that to me extra thin, and then we can clamp it into place. We will just want to make sure that we don't have any gaps. And kind of press it together a little bit there. It kind of really helps push out a little bit of polystyrene there, which will really help fill that gap on those seams. And we'll just continue down the body of the missile, gluing it up. And the only really problem is going to be on the end, but we'll get to that. And just run it along. And I like to glue it up in sections here just to make sure that I've got everything pretty much aligned. The better your alignment, the better off you're going to be. And as you can see on the end there, it kind of springs a little bit. So we're just going to add some, to me, extra thin right down into that groove. And then we can clamp it. Now, the good thing about using these wooden clothespins is that they don't slip off. Well, I mean, they will, but they're not like plastic clamps, which would just slide right off of that taper. And so with it all clamped up, we can go ahead and clamp up the other two missiles and let this set up. So I'll make sure that I give it about 20 minutes so that everything has pretty much set. Now, it's not completely dry, but that's okay because we've got some other things we need to do, and that involves perfect plastic putty. Now, if you're not using perfect plastic putty, I really, really love this stuff. It is water soluble. Now, it will shrink a little bit, of course, because as the water, of course, dries, it may leave you a small crack or a little void that you need to come back and refill, but it dries really quick compared to all the other putties. And we have this large seam that's going to be kind of on the top of the missile, and we don't want to see that. We want it to not be so pronounced there. So we're going to use that perfect plastic putty to fill that gap. And we're going to run it all the way down and then around these, some sort of, I don't know, sensor points or whatever they are. Could be some sort of intake maybe, I don't know. So I don't know that much about a SAM-6. We just want to make sure that we get everything filled as much as we can. And as you can see, it's quite a mess, but that's okay because it is a water-soluble putty. So using a earbud or cotton swab or whatever you want to call it, we'll just take and soak these all this excess with a little bit of water. And then we can come back and we can just clean this up. Now these Q-tips or cotton swabs that I'm using, I got these off of Amazon, and I think they were like in the cosmetics section. But they have a fine point on them. I mean, it doesn't stay fine for too long, but it really does help versus the regular cotton buds. As you can see, that cleans up. We haven't sanded any of that. That's just using a cotton bud. So that's nice. So we just got to do the other side. Now I do want to come back and make sure that these little locator slots that are there for our stabilizer fins, that we don't have any of that putty there. Now we do not use the water on the nose of the missile there where we filled that one gap. We're going to sand that. So we do have a little bit of a ridge where we glued these two halves together. So I'm using, first off, this is a kind of a hardback sanding stick, 400 grit, just to kind of knock that down a little bit. And then we do need to square off the nozzle, just to make sure that all that's cleaned up. So that we're just kind of dressing it all up there. And we want to check and make sure that there's no gaps or anything. And if we need to adjust, we will. So next we're going to use a sponge core flexible sanding stick. Boy, that's a lot to say, isn't it? But what that does is it really keeps us from sanding a flat spot. And you don't want any flat spots on your curved surface. So we're just cleaning that up and just making sure that everything looks good. And then we'll do the same thing with the rest of the body of the missile. First of all, using that 400 grit sanding stick just to knock that ridge down. And part of that's from the molding process. It's kind of flared a little bit on that edge. And we just want to knock that off. But now we don't want a flat spot, though. So just lightly sand it down. And then we can come back with that flexible core type sanding stick. And that'll keep us from putting any flat spots. And if we do have a small flat spot or something there, it being really soft, it'll kind of round that off for us. And that's what you want. And we're spending a lot of time sanding this because the missiles are very, very important. I mean, that's the whole point of the vehicle, right? So if our missiles don't look good, that's going to detract from the rest of the vehicle. And we will progress into finer and finer grits. I think this one right here is like a 2000. I don't think you really need to go too much more than that. But just as you can see, it really cleans that up nicely. And we just want to pay attention to when it gets up real close to some of those other components. And we'll just continue on with our sanding process. So now when it comes to the nose, we didn't use any water to clean off this perfect plastic putty because we don't want to create any voids or any little sink marks there. So we're just going to use a 400 grit stick, and all we're doing is knocking down the actual putty. We're not removing any plastic, or at least I'm trying not to remove any plastic. I just want to remove that perfect plastic putty. Now, once we get it knocked down, we can go ahead and do the same thing that we did with the entire body and just sand off and smooth out that filler there. And it's the same process. It just takes a little bit of time. And of course, since you've got 3 missiles to do, you know, you have 3 times the work. But that's okay. We just need to make sure that we do a really good job. And this is pretty much the same type of application that you would use on the fuselage of an aircraft to take care of those fuselage seams. And there we go. That looks good. All right, so back to our instructions. So I'm going to do this a little bit out of order. I'm not going to put those little attachments on yet. What I want to do is I want to put on these other two, I don't know, they're not really, well, it might be a hard point, but this particular one, A9, or I'm sorry, A7, goes on the side that's got the little square holes in it. And I want to make sure that I've got the right one. And as you can see, this one here has that little spear point on the end of it, and that's the one we want to use, and that goes on the bottom of the missile. And then we'll put those other attachment parts on. So it just slots into place, and it lines up nicely, and we'll just use the TE extra thin to affix it. And then we can go ahead and put the one that goes on to the top of the missile and just cement it into place. So we do have two little bitty fittings. These are for hoses that are attached to the actual missile that, I don't know if they're hoses or if they're, I don't know, cables, but they need to go in and they need to point straight down as the missile would be attached. And as you can see, it does have a little square peg with an angled base, and that is to conform to the circumference there of the missile to point these directly down, or at least that's what it looks like in the instructions. So that's what I'm doing. So I put these on with my fingers, and then I use the tweezers just to make sure that they're aligned. I don't want to use tweezers on something so small because you can lose it really quick. So next up we have these little caps. They kind of look like intakes to me, like a jet intake, but I've left the sprue on it there, the sprue gate, so that I didn't lose them. And I've cleaned up the one side, but we're going to have to clean up that other side there. And as you can see how small that is, we're going to wait and do that after it's been cemented to the actual missile. So we just need to orient it and try to make sure that we can still get to that. I mean, you can always use your craft knife to get in there and trim it down because that sprue gate, as you can probably see a little bit of it there, is kind of squared off. So once these little caps are in place, we'll be able to come back in and sand that down. So with all of those in place, we can go ahead and put the next part on. And it is a little bitty T, and I left the sprue gate long on it so I'd have something to hold on to, as you can see there. And we just need to put that in that little square hole there. And we want to make sure that it is square to the actual missile and that the little T handle is crossways and not misaligned. So once we get this on, we'll set the missile aside while we work on the other two and let all this dry. Now once everything's dried up, well, has solidified enough for us, we can trim off that little sprue gate that we left long there. And now we can pay attention to those little remnants of those sprue gates that were on these small round pieces here. And we'll just sand those off. And it's worth mentioning that we should really let that TE extra thin set up. That way we're not pushing these pieces out of alignment while we're cleaning them up. And we don't want to forget about that little T piece on the bottom of the missile there. We'll take care of that little, whatever's left of that sprue gate from where we clipped it off. And just lightly sand that. So now we have our stabilizer fins, and as you can see, they have a really, really teeny tiny alignment tab, if I could figure out what to call it. But I am going to put a little bit of To Me Extra Thin on that tab because I want it to actually kind of soften up a little bit. And the reason for this is when we put our glue into the slot, or solvent into the slot there, we kind of want these things to weld themselves together. And they're not necessarily all that precise. So I do need those to kind of conform to the missile there. So by using the To Me Extra Thin and kind of melting it a little bit, we can go ahead and attach these fins. So we can't really straighten anything up until we get at least 2 on. So we'll go ahead and put the next one on. Same process. I'm doing the exact same thing. I want it to kind of soften up a little bit before we actually attach it. That way it really melts itself together there. And we're doing the one directly across from the first one we put on. And now we can actually do some alignment. So you really need to do all these at the same time, as you know, one right after the other. That way they still have some movement and flexibility there to where we can actually line them up. You can't really square one fin, you know. Well, I can't because my eye's not that good. So some of you guys are probably good at this, but we need to have a little bit of movement there. So we need to just pretty much do them one right after the other. So with the first 2 on, we go ahead and put the third on. Same process. Kind of want it just to melt together there a little bit. And then we can put the last one on. And this is on the just on the nozzle end of our missile. Got to hold it there just a little bit to make sure that it sticks good, and then we can check because they're supposed to be 90 degrees out from one another. So we'll have to make those minor adjustments. Now, you wouldn't want to put just 2 of these on and then come back tomorrow, because if you do, they're going to be really, really solid, and we don't want that. We want to be able to make those small adjustments there. And that looks good. So you can see we're going to do the same thing with the forward fins, and I am using those wooden clothesline or clothespins to kind of make like a little bipod for our missiles, because we do not want to lay this missile down anywhere because that would probably disturb the alignment of our fins, and we don't want that. If you accidentally did that, you might come back tomorrow and things not be the way you left them. So we're going to go ahead and put all these fins on. And it's important to note that once you get them on, don't mess with these missiles anymore. Once you get them lined up, you know, these fins, you really need to let them set overnight. So that they can fully dry, and you're not going to have to worry about, you know, bending them out of shape, because we don't want that. And so that's one missile, and we have 2 others to do. And here we are with our 3 missiles. Now, as I did each step on one missile, I did it on the other 2 missiles as well, which gives us time to let certain components dry so that we don't disturb them before we get to the next segment of adding different parts onto the missiles. So that's kind of important, but we do have our 3 missiles done, and now I'm going to let those dry overnight. And there we go. So we managed to get our tow cable on, and I'll cut to length. Of course, I didn't follow the instructions as usual there. I just didn't like the shape that they had. I kind of like mine better, and I used more of the cable than they would have used, I guess. So, but I think it looks pretty good. So, and we got these little handles and our saw, and then these little clips on our engine deck. We got those done, as well as these little blackout drive markers. Those are on with the brackets, and of course our exhaust screen there. So that's looking good, and that completes the lower hull, so that's in good shape. And then we also got 3 of our missiles built up, as you can see here, and yeah, they look pretty good. And those foam type sanding sticks that we used really did a nice job in helping clean up that seam there on our missile, along with, of course, our perfect plastic putty. If you're not using perfect plastic putty, I suggest that you should try that out. I think you'll really enjoy that, and really great for filling those little seams. So that's it for this video. We have to build our actual launch apparatus and turntable for the missiles in the next video. So that should be the last of the build part, and then we'll get on to painting later. So you guys look out next Friday for the next video, and we'll get all that construction part done. So special thanks to all my subscribers. It's because of you guys that I keep putting these videos out. And if you're not a subscriber, and hopefully I earned your subscription, you'll subscribe today. And that's it. Leave me a comment and how you think that the build's going. And yeah, I'll just see you guys next Friday. So stay safe.